Hey, hello wonderful people, it's Genevieve and my goal here on this channel is to teach you all about illustration and a little bit of design too. Now today's video is video 2 of this new type that I'm trying out on the channel, which is more of a draw with me combined with an art talk and a drawing challenge. Now last month the challenge was to create an illustration for a food truck based on a food truck name generator, and it was really quite funny. Now this month we're doing something way more serious. Not really. We're going to create illustration for seed packets. So if you want to follow along, make sure to check the video description to get more details about how to create your seed packet. Spoiler alert, there's a free template that you can download, but otherwise you can just sit back and relax. Now, to be completely honest with you, I had no idea what I was going to do with this seed packet at first, because I know I needed Coco's cantaloupe. I'm giving mine as a gift, so I just needed those two combination together. But I didn't know what to actually draw. And so I started, as you can see on the top left, with a quick doodle of the person, and then just slept on it. Actually kind of left it at the side for a few days. And I got to the point where I really needed to make progress on it, because again, it was for a gift, and usually gifts have deadlines. And I didn't know what to do. I really did not. And I am someone who, almost to a fault, need to be early when I do things. Procrastination terrifies me. It stresses me out so much. I need to, when I make a video for the channel, have it ready at least 2 weeks in advance, otherwise I feel like I'm late. Not sure where I get that from. That's a whole other discussion, I guess. But essentially what I'm saying here is I'm rarely faced with tight deadlines because I don't let myself get there. But a lot of people actually, especially creative people, function better with a deadline, and they have this kind of productive procrastination, I guess. I'm not sure if that would be the right way to call it. Those people really thrive when they have a limited amount of time to be creative. And so I try to put myself in that mindset here and see, okay, let's just try whatever. I don't have ideas really that I love, but I also don't want to get in that perfectionism paralysis that we talked about in the last video. And so I just started trying to add some colors, which, as you can see here, I use my technique that I use all the time, which is just doing quick color blocks of the different elements and then creating my color palette from there. So just changing the colors as I go. I find that is a great way to beat white page or blank page syndrome, I should say, because you're just drawing something, you're just keeping your hands and your brain busy, and eventually I find something tends to emerge from that. But to go back to this idea of being stuck and not really having anything you like, but having a deadline coming up, that's actually one of the ideas behind the creative challenges, or what made me want to create those challenges, I should say. If you've watched some of my videos, you may know one of my degrees is in graphic design. And although I would say like real fancy serious design is not for me. As you can see, I'm more of a silly cutesy illustration type of gal. I feel like working in graphic design taught me a lot in terms of finding inspiration and getting beyond art blocks and just moving forward, because when you have a client, you usually have a deadline. Especially more in graphic design, I feel like deadlines are usually way shorter than if you're working as an illustrator, because illustration projects, at least the ones I worked on, are books, and so they're projects that span over months and months. But graphic design, if you work in an office, even more, which I did for a little while. I was the head graphic designer for the music festival we have back home, which was super fun. But anyway, I digress. If you're sitting in an office, you are just like anyone else who's an office worker, sitting there on a set time that your employer decides. And if you're not feeling creative that day at 9:15 a.m., well, suck it up, because this is the time that you're working and that you're getting paid. And so you need to figure out a way to get beyond that lack of innate, I guess, inspiration and just get something out on the paper. And I know it sounds quite insensitive when I say it like that, just pretty much suck it up, buttercup. But there's a lot to say about this idea of just forcing creativity. I think a lot of people hope that creativity is just going to down on them. But that's just not how it works most of the time. And that's a beautiful thing. You have to learn how to get creative, and you have to figure out what are your little rituals that you can implement to get creative. So for example, for me, I get creative. The best time of the day for me is 10:30, 11-ish p.m. When the world is asleep is when I just really come to life. And I think if you go back to when we were hunter and gatherers, you needed to have people that were really alert and happy, I guess, just thriving in the morning to take care of the camp and just watch over, get the fruit, all those things. And you needed people that were instead really alert and awake at night to protect everyone that was sleeping and just keep an eye out for dangers. So I think we need to be able to recognize that in ourselves as well. Is there a time of the day that works best for us? So for me, again, it's late in the evening. But beyond that, what kind of environment do you get creative in? Do you thrive when you're sitting in the middle of a coffee shop? Does seeing people around you bring you ideas? Or do you prefer being in your own head in a small, quiet room? Are you someone who enjoys sitting down in a structured or at a structured desk, so with a nice chair? Or are you like me, you just want to flop down on the ground in the most uncomfortable looking position with your iPad to sketch and get the ideas? And there are so many little different combinations like this, and the idea is really to get to know you and know what works for you, to get you in that state of what the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right, I practice a lot, but it's quite challenging to me, but what he calls the state of flow, or the optimal experience, which is when you are totally focused on the task at hand and your brain is almost in this alternative space of just creativity and ideas, and you're almost, I don't want to say you're not conscious of what you're doing, but that's kind of what it feels to me. I'm not actively thinking, it's not strenuous creative exertion, it's just, it flows. Literally, that's the word. It doesn't feel like I have to make an effort to find the ideas. The ideas are just building upon each other in my brain, and I feel like my head is struggling to catch up with the ideas, putting them on paper quickly enough. And so obviously being in that stage is such a valuable thing for a creator, but it can be quite challenging to find your routine and find what gets you in that flow. And I think a big reason for that is that people often forget what to me is a huge part of the equation of that flow routine, or that optimal experience preparation, however you want to think of it. And it's this idea we touched on earlier on in the video of some people working really well if they have 2 weeks between now and the deadline, and people who instead thrive under the pressure of the deadline. And I'm not saying that you're always going to have the choice. That's quite rare, actually, that you're going to have the choice, at least in a professional setting, of what you're going to create and when. But just knowing your preferred setup or preferred situation can really genuinely help a lot. So let's say you're someone who thrives under a deadline. That is definitely not me, but it is for sure my husband. And let's say that over the years, I've got the opportunity to, how can I say that? I've got the opportunity to learn how that works a little bit better, whether I want it or not. But yeah, if you're someone who thrives under a deadline, you've probably noticed that sometimes, even if that's when you thrive, there is not enough time left for you to actually complete the task at hand. But knowing that you thrive with that deadline, how can you trick your brain to get in that state of flow from the deadline without actually getting stuck and rushing at the end, losing sleep, and all those things that are just not sustainable and healthy for you in general? So instead, you can bank on the idea of productive procrastination, which again is a term that I'm totally just loosely using here. I don't know if that's a thing. But the idea is to get started on a project somehow and set yourself some smaller deadlines before the big deadline. So you can trick your brain to think, oh gosh, I need to get this done, so I'm going to find ideas now, but you're actually not stuck and strapped for time with your actual client or whatever the situation is. So let's take the example of a fully illustrated book, like a children's book. What you could do is say you need to submit the sketches by this date, and then you need to submit one colored spread by this date, and then half of the colored spread by this date, and the full book by this date. So really splitting it up so that you have less chances of having just one massive chunk of the project that you are keeping until the end, thus procrastinating, but in a non-productive way. Now, on the flip side, if you are someone who, like me, love to be done with things weeks ahead, again, in a non-healthy way, sometimes life is not going to give you weeks ahead. Like, you're not going to get the heads up. You just need to show up and be creative now. So how can you get over that? The main challenge for us is usually to stay calm enough to get in the zone of flow. So if you're panicking because you feel like you don't have the time and you don't have ideas and you don't know what to do and blah, 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 you're just never going to get there. So instead, just sit down and pretend the deadline is far away enough that it still exists, but it's not just paralyzing to you. It's not terrifying. It's not this looming thing over your head. And sit down and just draw whatever. And then don't allow yourself to get up until you actually have something on the page. Whether you like it or not, it does not matter. Just get something out there to get yourself out of that stage of paralysis, of the analysis of the blank page freak out. And at first, being creative on the spot or being creative further away from a deadline, being creative on a time frame that is not yours, essentially. At first, that is always going to be challenging, and that's okay, but it's something that you can practice and you can get quite good at. And it's worth it, honestly, because it is so freeing when you're able to just sit down and create no matter what. Sometimes, you relapse and sometimes it's more challenging. But if in general you can work on that skill of understanding your habits, understanding your preferences, but also understanding how to go beyond them when you're in a situation that is not your preferred situation, it is going to completely transform your creative experience in the best way possible. And so these creativity challenges that we have now monthly are a way for you to try your hand at that in a very low stake scenario. Of course, it's not like, again, you have a client who's expecting anything out of you. This is just something fun that we're doing here in the community. And it's based on the way the graphic design study program that I followed, how that was structured. And so we would have these projects that we were graded on, of course, and we would have a general theme, like creating a label for a jar of a certain type of product, a grocery food product, or creating a little booklet to tell kids about a certain type of animal. There were always these overarching themes, but we never get to actually pick the specifics of what we were doing. So for the food label, we were assigned, I think I got like a mustard or something. And then the booklet, I had to do something about bats. So we were always told what the specifics were. And we had to be creative within those parameters and within the time frame and other considerations that were for that course. And so the creativity challenge is that, but in a much more fun and loose way, of course, with way less pressure than what we would get in the design program. But it's such a great way, again, to get you to experiment with finding creativity, finding what brings you in that state of flow, finding what doesn't work for you, because it does give you this structure that you get to play within. Sometimes if we just sit down and say, okay, I'm going to practice drawing, there's just too many things that we can do. It's just too wide open for us to actually start learning about how we are as creative people, what works, what doesn't work for us, how to overcome situations that are not our ideals, and things like that. And so creating within a structure is just such a powerful tool because it's going to allow us to, yes, practice your drawing skills, your creativity skills, have just a blast doing it, because honestly, these challenges are super fun. But mostly it's going to allow you to learn to know yourself better. And that's just so valuable. So I'm going to challenge you to take the creative challenge for what it is. And even if the combination that you're given is not something that really inspires you from the get-go, well, just run with it. And if the result is not something you're super happy with, that's okay. There's really nothing that depends on this illustration. It's just for fun. But try to put yourself in that uncomfortable zone that is just uncomfortable enough for you to have to push yourself and experiment with different things, but comfortable enough that you're actually going to enjoy doing this, because at the end, this is for fun. So in case you haven't gotten it yet, you can get your seed packet information for your challenge in the video description below. It is an Instagram post, and it's going to tell you what you need to draw or what you need to create based on the first letter of your first name. So super fun. And if you actually do tackle the challenge, even if you don't like the final result, please share it with me on Instagram. You can use the hashtag IDT for It's Drawing Time Creativity Challenge. And yeah, I'll share some in my story. I might share some in the next video. We'll see how it goes, but just take a stab at it, just try and have fun with it. And if you haven't listened to the last art talk, which was all about overcoming being a perfectionist, I highly recommend you check it out because it ties in directly with what we talked about today and some of the emotions that you may feel while trying the challenge. And you can find that video by tapping on the link right here. But before you leave, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, then click on the link right here and I'll meet you there.